Hi Felicia, hi Felicia.
Mom,
Yes.
we have to record a podcast ad.
And what ad is that?
We're going to promote the podcast so we get more listeners. If somebody said to you, what's Hi Felicia about? What is it about? Our media diets.
Crapola.
For some reason, people really respect and honor our opinions because we watch it all. Did you finish Netflix yet?
Did I?
Check out the podcast. It's a mother-daughter relationship that's one for the books. So, Hi Felicia with Marnie and Felicia anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Hi Felicia, bye Felicia.
Welcome to another episode of the And Both podcast. Today, Jess Freeman from Jess Creatives is with me in the studio. And one of the things that we end up talking about that I think is so important is this idea about the unknown in terms of like business and parenthood, and how oftentimes when we hit the unknown space, you want to reach out and ask people for help. But there's a different level of who is available to help and who has the options or the opportunities that are actually going to help you. So we delve into her work in SEO and digital design and graphic design, and then a little bit about the overlapping and the and both of motherhood and solo business ownership. And I think it's just really helpful and refreshing to have another person out there to tell people that the all or nothing absolutes about expertise is really not serving anyone but the person selling. So enjoy this episode, and here she is. Hello and welcome to the And Both podcast. Here we are going to hear from moms and those in motherhood that are doing the thing that works for them. They are honoring themselves alongside the all-encompassing role and level of expectation that is motherhood. And we are going to hear from as many different people as possible in their own experience. So you can find people to relate to. You can hear stories that will make you laugh, make you cry, all of the above, and that we will come together as a community to support one another in a way that is holistic and honoring of the woman and the mother as a whole. Hi, and welcome back to the And Both podcast. I am here today with Jess Freeman. Welcome, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
How about let's kick it off with telling people a little bit about you and what you do, and more importantly, what you want people to know.
Yeah, so I run Jess Creatives. I do web design and SEO for small business owners, and I'm also a mom and an author. And what I love most about my work is helping people realize like social media isn't the only way to market your business, because as moms and business owners, we don't have all the time in the world. We don't have the same 24 hours as Beyonce. And I know people like to say we do, but our 24 hours looks a little bit different. And I feel like people underutilize SEO, especially as moms, and it can be driving people to our business and our books and our podcasts and everything, for us while we are sleeping or taking care of the kids or, doing any of that stuff.
That's cool. So how did you get started in that? Like how did Jess Creatives get going?
So I actually knew in high school that I wanted to be a designer. It was like, I love art and computers. And my dad was like, you could do graphic design. And I was like, what's that? Like I literally didn't even know. And so he explained it. And I was like, that sounds great. I'll do that. And if anything is like a better explanation of my personality, like there's nothing. Like that is me in a nutshell. I just decide something and I'm like, that's what I'm doing. And so I got my degree in graphic design and started freelancing in college, just doing stuff for family and friends and people on campus. And back then I used to design and be like, yeah, just give me, like, I'll design the t-shirt. You just give me one of the t-shirts. So like that was my payment, because I was a college kid who loved free t-shirts. And actually, Jess Creatives came about because my senior year, we had to brand ourselves as part of our senior portfolio. And I was doing photography and design back then. And so I wanted something that encompassed both, and somehow came up with Jess Creatives. And I back then was like, oh, like I have this Jess Creatives thing. Maybe when I'm 45, I will like work for myself full time. I don't know why 45 was the benchmark, but it was actually 2 years later that I went full time. So it was, 20 years faster than I thought it would be. But yeah, that's kind of it. It's funny because it's like I have never known anything different. I've always been the artsy, creative one, and like this has just been my life for 13 years.
I love it. I love also that. I feel like so many of us, because I did this too. It's like, when I was in high school, I was like, when I'm 30, I'm going to have like my life figured out. I'm going to have it all sorted out. Like it was like, in that like 5-10 year plan, I was like, all right, when I am 30, I hit 30 and I was like, nah, that ain't it.
Not yet.
No. When I'm 40, and then I turned 40 last year, and I was like, oh, here's what happens. You just stop caring about the stuff you haven't done yet. Or you decide like, I'm trying to put all this effort into like 8 different lanes. And I actually don't even like those 3 lanes over there. So I'm just going to get rid of those. I know. Why is it's like 40, 45. We're like, I'm going to know.
It's the magical. It's just we're going to wake up one day and have all the answers. And I don't think it's happened for anybody.
I think that's cool though, because I think first of all, I always love this about the design field is that there's such a focus on like jumping in both feet, especially when you do it in school. It's like a project to brand yourself, a project to, as you're doing these things, there's all these opportunities to practice and to start to like put yourself out there and all of those pieces. And I just think I'm always so jealous of that in the design field because there's so many things like there's so many degrees that you have to go and then you do like you've got to do years and years and years and you can't do anything and you can't practice or you can't consult or anything like that. And then you graduate and then you've got to get this experience and then you can do that. So like, how cool is that you're you take like design 101 or some like intro course and they're like, here's how Canva works. And you design a bunch of stuff and now you're making money. Like that is amazing.
Yeah. And I feel like design is also one of those fields that depending on your skill level, you could actually get away with like not even having a degree. Like you could just jump in and like if you have the skills and the network, like you could just become a designer without that degree. But I didn't go that route. I needed the degree.
Yeah. But also too, like now that people are like these programs are available, like Canva didn't exist when you went to school. So it's like, now you don't have to wait. Like you don't have to go into the lab to have access to the graphic design program to do that. Like it's so convenient to be able to get practice there.
Yeah. And I was lucky enough that I actually had jobs in my field right after college, which I feel like was super rare. Maybe not super rare, but definitely not uncommon for people to be like, well, I got my degree in this, but I'm working doing this, not actually using my degree. And I was lucky enough to get right into it. And so I was like, okay, I'm just plugging along.
Yeah.
Doing the design thing. Yeah.
I mean, I got my degree and I went back to working in the bar that I was working at. I was like, woo, I graduated. What am I? Oh yeah. No, I can't do anything with that. Like I can't. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. And then couldn't even do it for years after because it's clinical and you have to take licensing and supervision and all that stuff. My brother is an architect. And so when he went into architecture school, like the first semester, you start working at a firm and you start doing, you're not like redesigning the Zakim Bridge, but you're like, you have your feet in it and you're a part of a team.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah. I love being able to just like dive right in because I'm very much a doer. And so I'm glad I didn't have to do all these like what is it called?
Practicums.
There you go. Hours and like observation. Like I don't think I could have like handled that because I very much like to do.
It's painful.
So, yeah.
And so what made you pivot from like 40 to, oh, wait, it's been 24 months and now I've decided?
So a big part of it was I hated working my day jobs. My last day job. So I first had an internship, it was only a 3-month like summer internship. And then I worked for 2 years in churches as a designer. And then I switched to an agency, and the agency was a joke. And I had slowly over those 2 years had slowly kind of like maybe 45 wasn't the goal. Like it definitely wasn't like, oh, in 2 years, but I was like, maybe in like 5 to 7 years, like maybe by the time I'm 30, but I was still like, I didn't have a specific goal in mind. It was like, I want to grow Jess Creatives, but like, I'm not a dreamer. I'm very much a literalist. And so I was like, I don't know. I don't have this like big lofty dream of taking it full time by X date and making $1 million. Like I just want to grow it and eventually be able to take it full time. And I joined some Facebook groups of freelancers. And that's when I learned that there were people my age or younger that were like working for themselves full time. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Y'all work for it? Because I grew up in rural Kansas where like working from home, working remote was not a thing. Like everybody was teachers and worked at the hospital or farmed. Like I didn't have, that's why I didn't know what graphic design was. Like,
yeah.
And so, yeah, it was just hating the agency job. And we actually had like no clients at the agency. We think it was kind of a tax write-off or something, but that's a whole other podcast episode.
Well,
yes. So like I could write a book on like a novel on my experience there. And so I actually was spending my days working on Jess Creatives, like while at the office, because we literally did not have work. And so part of the great part about that was that I had a full, almost like 40 hours a week to dedicate to Jess Creatives. And I was terrified because my husband only worked part-time at the time. Like I got married 3 months after I graduated college. And he was working part-time, I was working full-time. And then I was like, I want to take Jess Creatives full-time. And then it became a little more real, like because the more miserable I got at the job, I was like, I really want to do Jess Creatives full-time. And what sealed the deal was when I finally stopped and looked at my numbers and was like, oh, I'm making more, like consistently, month after month, I'm making more in Jess Creatives than I am at my day job, which also shows you how poorly I was being paid.
Yeah,
at my day job.
To that.
Yeah. And so I was like, it was like September when I did this. And I was like, you know, what's my numbers looking like? Because back then I didn't know that, you know, you should do that every month and keep track of that kind of thing. And I was like, oh, like 7 out of the last 9 months, I have made more freelancing than I am at my day job. And I was like, so I talked to my husband. I mean, he was all for it, and talked to my family, and everyone was like, yeah, like go for it. I mean, as long as you're willing to like do the work. And if it doesn't work out, you know, go back and get a job. And now it's been 10 years. Like just a few weeks ago was my 10-year anniversary of like going full time. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Cause I love like the part in there about like, do you feel like if you had been pushing really hard for it to grow, that it would have grown in the way that it ended up going? Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like that idea of, because I think what happens now, or a lot of what you read about, like if you read people's side hustle posts on LinkedIn, it's like people are they're doing their regular job and they're trying to go as fast as they can to grow this side piece. And this is why like you can buy courses to like help you get from here to here in 3 minutes or less, and all of those things, because people want to get out of the spot that you were in.
Yeah.
Produce that. And like maybe because in your head you didn't have this timeline of like, oh, I have 18 months to get this going. Like, do you feel like that was helpful in terms of like not having the pressure for it to grow?
Yes. Yeah. Not having the pressure and like this deadline, I think definitely helped. And I was also, so this was like 2013, 2014. So like Instagram for business was not really a thing. Like it was back when everyone was still using filters and it was just photos of our food and like
I miss those days.
I mean, truly, like I can remember the first like now I'm totally blanking on her name, but I remember being like, oh, you can use Instagram like to market your business. And I was like, interesting. And I felt like I remember feeling like nervous to like make that shift. And I was like, oh, I don't know about this. And that was also with the aesthetic feed. And so like I was very like, oh, everything has to be really like bright and white. And so like I would just hold up anything against like my white wall and take a picture of it so that my feed was super aesthetic. Like, so I wasn't in the, like, I wasn't following any big gurus. So I was totally oblivious to like, how am I supposed to actually like market this? You know? So my marketing was like, oh, I'm just going to do side projects, like little fun design projects for myself to show my work. And I'm going to blog. Like that was the thing in the Facebook groups that I was in. Everyone was blogging to kind of show like, I know what I'm talking about and I can help you with X, Y, and Z. And so that was all of my marketing took. That was it. And it allowed me to really focus on just working on my actual design skills and then really creating good systems in my business. And I think that is a big part of also why I was able to go full time, is because like literally the first course and the only course I took for probably like the first 5 years of my business was something about, it was all around streamlining your business and like client contracts and questionnaires and like how to onboard people in a smooth system. And like that was it. And so like that was the first course I took. And I remember it was $149 and I was terrified to spend that amount of money. And because when you're making pennies, you know, $149 seems like a big chunk of change. And like that was the only thing. I wasn't taking these courses on like how to have an automated funnel and how to do this passive income. Like it was like all I focused on was design and the client experience. And I think that really helped me and like served my business the best. So,
and that's to have that like 30,000 foot view of what do I need in order for the client facing part of this to be as simple and successful as possible. I think that is, that's what we're all going for, right? It's like you want someone to come on your website and you want them to, first of all, you want people to find your website and then you want them to come on and like make it easy to go through that whole process. Yeah, I think that message, it often gets lost because there is so much noise in the course space and in the, you've got to hear this now too, like the SEO space is
changing.
Yeah. And everyone's an expert, but everyone is also an expert at like why the only way that it can get done. This is when I get scared, is when people are like, the only way to do SEO is this way, and I'm the only one who can do it for you. That's what scares me about those pieces, because SEO is, to me, SEO is like the mechanic of the internet. Because like, I'm not going to fix my car. I understand generally how it works, but like, I am not going to open up the hood of my car and pull apart the engine and be like, actually, it would be more efficient if this was here. Right.
Right.
And I feel like that is what happens when you talk to people that are like SEO people. It's the mechanics of your business. It's how all of the gears run behind the scenes and how people find you and all this stuff. And I have had these conversations where I've been like I am standing in front of the mechanic and I am making the noise that my car is making, and they are looking at me like, oh my God. Oh my God. And so now I don't go to the mechanic, by the way. I don't go. I refuse. I'm like, this is the thing, or I can turn the radio up, whatever. But I feel like that's what happens in business is you get frozen because you're like, I don't know who to talk to and I don't know where to go. So like, how do people find the fit for them when it comes to stuff like that?
I think one, see if they have content you can consume. Like follow them on Instagram or their podcast or their blog. Like get on their email list. Like figure out what their vibe is. And like I approach a lot of things in business as like there's not like one straight solution, or like this is not the end all be all solution to all of your problems. And so that's like my approach to SEO. I'm like, here's the things you can do. If you want to do more, you could do these things. And like, there are a few things I'm like, well, we really do have to like you actually have to use your keywords. Like, there are parts of it that I'm like, no, really, we have to do this part. But there is a lot of smoke and mirrors in the SEO world as well. And I always tell people, like, when they inquire with me, because typically people reach out to a few different, they're like, let me get like prices from a few different people or see, availability. And I always say, like, totally fine. Like, if we're not a good fit or whatever, like, that's fine. Do not hire anyone who guarantees that they can get you XYZ results, because Google has their own algorithm, just like Instagram and Facebook. And so, yes, there are a lot of tried and true strategies. There's obviously like people who know what they're doing, but to be able to say like, I can get you to the number one spot in Google in 12 days or in 3 months, like there's no guarantee. Now, if they can say like, oh, I have a pretty good idea, like, I think you have a lot of potential, like, that's one thing to just be like, yeah, I think this could be pretty promising. But to guarantee it's a lie, because I mean, even if they've been in the business for 30 years, like there's still there's literally 200 factors that go into SEO. Like Google's ranking system has over 200 factors. And so like, and some of those are weighted very lightly and some are more heavily, like page speed is part of SEO and user experience, like all of that ties into SEO. And so just be very cautious around the people who like to guarantee things, because they're either going to do one, they're just not going to get the results and take your money, or two, they're going to do some spammy things that might help you immediately, but might harm you in the long run. Because like this past year and a half, Google has done some major algorithm updates. And if you are around SEO, you've probably heard people talking about the helpful content update, which is one of the big algorithm things they did. And so many people like lost a ton of traffic, because basically Google was like, we are prioritizing content that is actually helpful and actually valuable to people. And so if your piece is just totally fluff and just keywords and whatever, like we're not prioritizing it anymore. And so many people were putting out fluff content to rank, and then they lost those rankings because Google was like, yeah, this post isn't actually like helping the reader. It's not actually answering any questions. So we're not going to show it to people. And so that's part of like, you have to like really talk to the people and be like, okay, but what are you specifically going to do? Like if I hire you for SEO, like tell me specifically what you're going to do. Are you doing page titles? Are you doing backlinks? Are you doing content? Like what is this exactly? And figure out like what all they're going to do. But it's tricky.
Yeah. And I feel like that also goes across so many different aspects of life too, right? It's like when you're looking at the Instagram page of the person who's like got the kid that sleeps all the time, and you know, you can take your 2-year-old and they eat burritos and all that, and your kid's like only eats white food. And it's like, I can teach you how to do this, this, and this. And you're like, yeah, no, like I get that it's important. Like my kid eats this and my kid tries this, or like my kid needs to sleep so that I can sleep, so that I can feel like a whole person. It's that when things get into the absolutes. Like somewhere along the line, it got weird in people talking about their expertise versus I am the expert. And like that line has just sort of slowly shuffled over. So, and I think too, like to your point, that if people are just sort of giving you like the end thing, the end like presentation or the end statistic or whatever versus like the back and forth.
Yeah.
It's a good call.
Yeah. Same with, I mean, even with web designers, I would even say, even if you're like, oh, I'm going to hire someone to do my website and this person says they're going to do SEO, like not all web designers or developers actually know SEO. Mm-hmm. And there's different levels of what they know of SEO. And so I have seen people who hired somebody, they were told they were going to have SEO done. And then I looked at their site and I was like, there is no SEO on your site. Like, it's not optimized.
Yeah.
Like, just because they installed the Yoast plugin, it does not mean they did SEO. Like,
this is the mechanic thing again, right? Like, people are standing there going, yeah, no. And the mechanic's like, yeah, I fixed it. And you're like, well, why is there a rubber band where there should be a like?
Yes. Yeah. So even if you're like, oh, I'm not hiring just because you can hire people just to do SEO. And then there are web designers like me who also do SEO but not all. So even if you're like, oh, I'm not worried about investing in just SEO, like I don't want to go like heavy into it, but I want my site to at least have like basic optimization, like make sure you like double check, like what exactly are they going to do for that SEO, you know, like don't be afraid to ask those questions.
Yeah. So how old are your kids?
I have one daughter and she is 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how has that layered into business and working for yourself?
Yeah, so I had my business for it was like 6 or 7 years at that point. And so I feel like I was really lucky just that I had this strong like foundation built up. It wasn't like, cause I know there's people who like, oh, I'm in business for 2 years and then I have a kid and like now I have to figure out that, whereas it was just like, I had everything set up. And so I think that helped, but she is in daycare. So that's also a big help. Cause I know like, I like to be transparent about that because I know we all have like, some of us don't have daycare. Some of us have part-time help and it can be really stressful. I know when looking on social media and you're like, how is this person earning like $1 million bajillion dollars and they have 3 kids and you don't see that like, oh, they have a full-time nanny and maid and chef and like whatever else. So she is in daycare, but I've definitely had to, I mean, even that I still have to adjust my working hours. Obviously, as we all know, sick days and fall breaks and Christmas, you know, like those kinds of things. And so I've had to just get really, really clear on like, do I have time for that in this season? Or is this moving me closer to my goal or not? Because everything I say yes to, even if it's like a small yes, I'm like, oh yeah, I can do that. It's still taking a small percentage away from like the bigger overarching goal. And so really trying to focus on like, this is getting me closer to my goals. This is helping my brand. This is part of quote unquote the plan versus like, oh yeah, I can do that. Like, oh, that's easy. Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem to do. Like I was just talking about this with a friend this morning. Like it's very easy for me being like a techie person and being in business as long as I have. it's easy for me to be like, oh yeah, like I can do that either for a friend or a colleague or for myself, or like, oh yeah, like I could just do that. Like I don't need to hand that off to my VA or something like that. Like, and so I'm still even having to often like kind of recalibrate and be like, is this something I actually need to say yes to? Like, is it getting me closer to the goal? Or is it just like oh yeah, I can do that. And it's also hard because I like to help people. Like, not to like sound cliche, but I'm a people pleaser. And so like when people are like, oh, can you, I'm like, oh yeah, I could do this quick thing. And so just really having to set boundaries around that. And like, I don't have the same time, and I have to also be flexible with.
Hey, it's Ashley. I'm interrupting your weekly episode of the And Both podcast to let you know that the And Both community is launching on November 29th. It is going to be a space for podcast guests, podcast listeners. I'll be in there to meet and connect directly with each other, to learn from each other, to share resources, to share stories, to share experiences. The podcast started because I wanted to create a community of more authentic versions and stories of motherhood than what is being shared commonly these days. And so this is the next step. I hope that you'll join me inside. We launch on November 29th. If you want more information, you can head to andbothpodcast.com to learn more there.
Who knows when a sick day is coming, and just having to be able to shift things around. Like, I know pre-kid I was very like, this is the timeline for the project, and I am still like strict, but I also am like, I've added in a like clause in my contract that's like, if a family member is sick, like we can adjust the timeline. Like, whereas before that, I didn't necessarily, have built-in sick days built into the plan.
Yeah. I think that's the like the magic of having your own business. And like you said, like having it established for so long, because if you are trying to grow that and you're trying to grow your family at the same time, you don't necessarily always have the awareness of how long things take. And that's that's the whole part, right? Is like you're trying to figure out if you're coming or going in work, and you're trying to figure out what's going on with the kids, and you're trying to figure out, and then if you layered on top of that like a job that was, and in the meantime, or as this thing goes, like I think so often that's what leads to that feeling of like, I don't even know what day it is. I don't know where I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to do. And that's that feeling of like, if I'm not doing it, then I must be doing it wrong. And it's like, well, probably not. It's that efficiency piece.
Yeah. It's automating things, and like I mentioned earlier, like having the systems, like that became even more important to me after becoming a mom. Like I'm a very type A person. So I've always been big on like, oh, this is a good system. This is a good setup. But even especially after becoming a mom, I was like, okay, I don't have time to do these other little small things. And I really need to offload them and either hire someone to do it or automate it, or it's not happening.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the hardest one to get to, right? Because it's like you're always trying to be so flexible with your time for everyone else. And then if that doesn't work, it's like, well, I could just stay up a little bit later and just do this thing. And it's like how much of the conditioning around being a helper and doing that feeds into why you're up at 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah. It's hard, which luckily I've never been a 2:00 in the morning person. But I mean, there are times when I'm tempted, in the evenings. Like, I've also been really good about boundaries, and even more so, I think, post kid, because pre-kid, it was just my husband and I, and it was just like, oh yeah, like I can just pull out my laptop while we watch TV and whatever. And now it's like, one, I don't want to necessarily be the mom that's always working. Like, not that I'm trying to hide my work from her, but I definitely don't want to like every night be pulling out my laptop. But it's like, I want that time to reset, even if she's asleep, cause like I know that like downtime and recharge time in the evenings makes me a better mom, but also helps me as a business owner too.
Mm.
Like that reset and not just go and constantly working. I have had seasons of that before, and it always leads to burnout and exhaustion. And so having those good boundaries. But there's also when I know, like there's always been, the nights where I'm like, oh, she's has a fever or throwing up, so she's staying home tomorrow. And so I'm like, okay, like gonna work this evening to make up for the hours that I will not be working tomorrow. So like then there's that too. But I also am like, these are just usually a few days. Or my daughter, knock on wood, has been the lucky type of like, she's usually never sick for more than like a day or two. Or like where she needs to stay home. So I've not, again, knock on wood, because we're going into sick season. But I'm like, she hasn't had the type of sickness where I'm like, oh, she like has to be home like all week. And so it's usually like, okay, I am going to work this evening, and then I'll get up at 5 a.m. and put in a few more hours. And that will kind of like make up for the time tomorrow. And most of that is putting it on myself, of like feeling like I need to. It's not necessarily that I have to, like my clients a lot of them are moms. And so, if I have to reschedule a call, or I'm like, hey, I'm not in today, so like you won't hear from me, they're like, okay, that's fine. Like they don't care. They get it. But it's me putting that pressure on myself of like, oh, well, I need to like stay ahead on this work.
Yeah. That's what I feel like. All of this return to work, like return to the office, and, all of that piece. I've written and trashed a bunch of posts about this because I can't quite figure out how to make the words come through on the page. But it's this idea of like, we're expected to be grown-ups because we are grown-ups in every other aspect of our life. But then when you talk about work, it's like all of a sudden you have to go in to be supervised so that someone can like approve whether or not you're working. And it always makes me like, it's a total head scratcher for me, right? It's like, if you are a person who you got to work today, right? So like all of the things that you need to do, like you fed yourself, you brushed your teeth, you ate, you got dressed, like all of the, you've gone there, and you either took a mode of transportation that you had to get a pass for and you got a pass for it, or you drove, you pumped gas, like all of these steps that maybe it's the OT in me, but like all of these steps to get you into the office. And then all of a sudden you get there and someone's like, you can't have this day off.
Right.
And you're like, what? Like, it's not like Major League Baseball. I get it. Okay. Right. Like you're doing the same thing that you did when you were like an 8-year-old kid. I get that idea. You travel around and you have all of these components. Like you've got to be there. You've got to go to practice. You've got to do all of that stuff. If you are going into work in an office, like, why does somebody have to tell you when you can do things when like for all the other hours of your day and your life and your week? And then you become a parent and you're like, no, I do this for people who can't do this for themselves. But now I've got to like come in here and like be the good employee. But then I go home and I'm like the CEO of my own life. And I feel like that's such a, why don't we talk about that more? It's like, why don't we just let people be grown-ups? And how does it always work out that the people that I have these conversations with who are like, no, I will get my work done. Like if I tell you I'm going to get the work done or I have a deadline, I will stay up late. I will get up early. I will work around all of that. I can like figure out how to do life and how to do work at the same time. They're all moms. It's like, what?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because we know how to get it done. Like that's
Yeah. And then give people the credit. That's the like the, the like concluding sentence, right? Is like, give people the credit for all of the things that they do in their regular life.
Yeah.
In this like office situation that keeps kind of popping up here and there on the internet, or every couple of months when they're talking about the next big company needs to bring people in. I'm like, I work with people. Everything I do for my job is remote. Everything has always been remote. The idea of having an office space makes my skin crawl, because like, I don't want to supervise people.
Right.
I want people to like, here's the things that I would love for you to help me with. Let me know, like, if you need more time or whatever. Here are the hard deadlines, and here are the soft deadlines, and here is like, let's structure it all this way. Let's put a system in place, like you do. And then if we need to change it, then we need to change it. But like, I'm going to trust that you're an adult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think you bringing up the deadlines, I think that's something else that was a big shift for me after having my daughter. Like, again, I'm very like, I have the systems and I have the boundaries, and not that I thought pre-kid that it was like, if I don't get this website launched, like it's going to be a major like faux pas or something, like, oh my gosh, the world's going to end. But it was, I think it was that kind of like perfectionist in me and like people pleaser of like, we have to like get this up, and it cannot be a day late. Can't be a few hours late. Like it has to be on time, which obviously that's what they're paying me for. So like, to be clear, I'm not like, let's just like publish it whenever, like, but like, whatever. But have I had clients who are like, oh, my kid was sick, like, so I didn't get to review it today. And I'm like, it's fine. Like, we can push the launch from Thursday to Friday. It's not going to be a big deal. Like, after I had my daughter, I was like, like, these are just websites. Like, of course, I do find them important. And I do stick to, like, this is the service I'm providing and I'm going to deliver on time and that kind of thing. But also, like, you get sick, I get sick, our kids get sick, like, pushing back the launch a day or two, like, it's fine. Like, you already have a website, and most of the time, my clients already have a website. So I'm like, it can just live there another day until the new one goes live.
Right.
And it's funny because then, like, I find in some ways, things in business became looser and less of a like high stress point. And in other ways, becoming a mom made me like much more strict or like bigger boundaries or, like things like that. So it was like some things, it was like a mix of both, and just realizing like, it's a website and a logo, and like, it'll be fine if it goes up a day late or 2 days late because we were sick, or there's a hurricane, or like whatever,
right.
Like there's too much life that's happening that I'm like, it'll be fine. Like, this isn't Nike's website that we're launching. Like, it'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's that idea of like, not necessarily that like all of your priorities change. It's just you figure out which priorities are priorities to you versus which priorities are priorities to everybody else. And like, in business, if you're working with somebody in business, you've got to align on priorities. But and this is where, if you're working with another person who is a mom who understands, a mom who owns their own business also, and it's like, okay, these are the things, the have to things. This is the priorities that we know need to get done. And I would go out on a very long limb to say, those are probably the ones that you do first, right? Because you're like, if all goes sideways, if there is another hurricane that goes barreling through this country and stuff doesn't work for weeks and weeks on end, at least I have this thing done that needed to get done.
Yeah.
Versus before, it may be like, okay, these are the easy things for me to do, so I'm just going to get these out of the way. And it's like, how do you reorganize and how do you shift it all around?
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely like a big shift, and just figuring out like what actually matters, and just having to be like flexible but still structured. Like that's the name of the game.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that too, like people don't, it's sort of that gets overlooked because then you run into the rub of like, here's what I need it to look like. And here's what it might look like right now. And here's what other people are telling me it's supposed to look like. And that's when like all of these things start to be in conflict with each other. And you're like, well, who do I listen to? Do I listen to me? Do I listen to that? Do I listen to like this random person on the other side of the internet who's like selling aprons that are printed with fig leaves on them? They are beautiful. I love them. I don't have a specific person in mind for that. However, like aprons with fig leaves are not going to help my bottom line today.
Right. And I definitely think I just saw, I think it was on Threads the other day about like, some of us are listening to too many voices. Like you have to like stick to a few voices because otherwise then they start contradicting each other. And then you're like, okay, well now what do I do? So I definitely like try to limit who I follow from like a coaching standpoint and like marketing standpoint. Like I don't like to even like from an Instagram perspective of like, I don't want to follow like 6 different Instagram experts or like 5 different Pinterest experts. Like, I don't think there's that. I feel like they're probably preaching similar-ish things. Like there's not that many ways to do Pinterest. But it just even, for those things, but then also thinking about like the bigger coaches and mentors, because if you pay close enough attention, like everyone is, it feels like, is speaking about how this is the solution.
Yeah.
Like, no, the email list is your solution. No, the website is the solution. Like, and it's like all of these work together. All of these pieces work together. You just have to figure out like what works for your business. And that it does get tough because it is loud out there.
Yeah. That's the thing is I feel like when you become a parent or when you become a mom, all of that stuff gets dampened because then there is, I mean, I don't think that everyone like all of a sudden has this like emerging from stone, like phoenix from the ashes kind of moment. But I feel like you cannot sort of like dampen down the fact that like a child has come into your life, however they come into your life. And that becomes a hard boundary around your time. That becomes a hard boundary around what you spend money on or where you spend your energy or the things you are focusing on. And it becomes easier to sort of dampen out those voices. And then that's when you get into like when you run in that lane, good to go, because that's really where it's easier to sort of filter all that stuff out. When there's like when you don't trust yourself because everything is so loud, then you run into that space of like, who do I actually listen to? And then it becomes that like, let's see, life by committee almost. It's like, how many different things can I source from Instagram and how many things can I source from Pinterest and how many things can I do this? And that's what drives the consumer machine, especially in this country, is like, no, don't listen to yourself. It's me. I got it. Don't worry. You don't have to worry. You don't have to think about it. And I remember my light bulb moment about business was that I had followed a couple of different people and I knew that they were sort of like related-ish to each other in terms of experience behind the scenes in the fact that like they knew each other and all of that. But one day, I don't know, I think everyone got on the same train and the content that came out, it was like 4 or 5 people. The content that came out was basically all the same thing, different ways, like it was said, but I just remember like this one catchphrase that they all said in the content. And I was like, wow, unfollow all of you people. Because that's not, I don't want that. I don't want to get picked apart, like drawn and quartered in attention by that space.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you. It's, yeah, you really have to like watch people's messaging and what they're preaching. I have noticed a lot of people, moms specifically, saying that they will not work with other coaches who are not moms. Like they're not
Yes.
going to hire like a business coach who is not a mom because
Yes.
like you need to understand my situation, you know,
Mhm.
and those who are not moms, like they don't always get it. And so I don't know, like, I don't know if those same people are even not following those people or if it's just like, I won't hire them if they're not a mom. But I feel like we really have to pay attention, especially as moms with our, whatever our situation looks like. Again, going back to the priorities and just like, if there's too many voices, it's going to mess up our priorities and then eventually kind of derail us or cause that, like you mentioned, cause that issue with our self-trust and self-confidence of like, I know what to do and I know what's best for my business. Because at the end of the day, it's our business. And I think sometimes we need to go, not like throw away all the business advice, but lean into kind of our gut and like what's our intuition telling us is like the best move.
Yeah. I think this too, like for me, the trigger phrase is always some variation of how bad do you want this?
Oh,
Like when people start putting it out there, like it's a choice, like staying up until 2:00 in the morning or going to bed and not staying up until 2:00 in the morning is a choice. And like, you must not want to be successful in all of that. And I'm always like, no, because I got to get up at 6 and I got to pack 4 lunches. Like it's not, I can't stay up until 2 and function as a human being in life. So that's that idea of like, if someone's going to offer me advice and they don't understand on the ground level where I'm at and where my priorities are in life, it's not to say that my business isn't my priority, but like there are human beings that need things to survive. That is more of a priority in whether or not I get a new email something out.
Yeah.
I haven't written an email since the spring because I don't have time for it. And everything telling me like on the, on social media and on the internet, stuff like that, it's like, you've got to have a weekly email that goes out and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's great, but I can't. Like, what quality of stuff am I going to be putting out in that regard?
Yeah. And it's along with the, how bad do you want it, is the like, well, you will find the money. And
Yes.
like, where? Like, am I supposed to dig a hole in my backyard or something? Like,
let me know where you found yours and I will dip on down.
I've always thought like there's a fine line between like, oh, like this is a like difficult, like like, am I going to spend the money? Like kind of a tough choice. And versus like the dollars are not in the bank account or like, I don't have the bandwidth, the margin in my budget. Like it's just not there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I have always told people, do not take out like a line of credit or something. Like, do not go into debt for a website. Like, please do not. You will be fine. Just wait a few years or whatever, or find somebody else. Like, no, this is not a like, how bad do you want it? This is not going to like magically make you $1 million overnight. So like, do not listen to the coaches who are like, you will find the money.
Or you'll get paid back. Like, go through my program, do my thing, whatever, and you'll make your money back in 6 weeks.
And I'm like, are you going to give me that money if I don't? Or like, and then they're like, well, then you must not have tried hard enough.
Yes, because you didn't want it bad enough.
I really do not like that messaging.
No, and it's problematic. And it's what like, it reinforces a culture around business and parenthood that hasn't worked forever, but got away with it for a long time because of the way that things were set up culturally, or people could have a one income household and survive. And now I mean, now anyone that's been to the grocery store in the last 5 years is like, oh yeah, 1-income household. That's really cute. Like,
Yeah.
no.
No, thank you.
Yeah, we can have bananas or we can have grapes, not bananas. Bananas are still amazing, but we can have berries or we can have like, I don't know, clothes for the fall. Like it's just berry budget. Oh my gosh.
And kids love berries.
They do. Like a bottomless pit of berry loving. So for the people out there that are like, well, I would like to work with somebody who is not going to make me feel like crap because I cannot, do 12 things at the same time and meet this deadline. But I really, really, really want to grow this part of my business. And I think that it's fun to I want to talk about this and I want to learn more. How do people find you?
Yeah. So I'm pretty easy to find. Jess Creatives, S on the end. Sometimes people miss that. JessCreatives.com or on social media at Jess Creatives, pretty much everywhere. And I also have a podcast called the Brand Wise Podcast, but it's WHYS, like your brand, your why.
Love that.
Play on words. And so we talk about, I interview people who have rebranded and changed anything in their business, anything from their offers to the colors, the website, it looks, part of it is kind of showing how rebranding can look different for everybody. So if you want to kind of hear stories about that and what they've learned and what was hard about it, you can listen to me there too.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I'll link everything in the show notes, and yeah, we'll get that out for everyone. I think that's cool.
Yes,
awesome.
well,
You're helping so many people. Well, thank you for coming on.